Hey everyone, it's Ringworm here, bringing you another collection video. That's right. This weekend I went to Salt Lake Comic-Con. I had a great opportunity to pick up some items, and I'm going to continue off of the last video a little bit on why collectors collect. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll get started here in a moment. Before we do, if you haven't done so already, please like this page, subscribe, make sure that you click on the notification button so you can keep seeing all the videos that I've got coming. I apologize, this video is a little bit late compared to the other ones. I try to do them at least once a week, but we had some things going on and wasn't able to do it. But as you can see, I've amassed quite a few things that we're going to talk about today, and then we'll get into that in a moment. Okay, for most of you guys, collecting is, you know, just what we do. We pick a passion, whether it's Hot Wheel cars, DC action figures, Marvel action figures, Transformers, or all the above. And so I picked this item right here. I wanted to show you guys. I've had this since I was a kid, and if any of you guys remember the Transformers cartoon show, it first aired in 1984, and this is pretty much what you got with a lot of those figures. You know, they come in different names. The original manufacturer of these toys, I believe, was called Takara Toys. Anyway, Hasbro brought it over to the United States. They made a cartoon after it. This right here is Ultra Magnus, and I transformed him like this for a specific reason, because I don't have a Generation 1 Optimus Prime, but this is a Generation 1 Ultra Magnus, and I just wanted to show you guys this particular figure because if you look up close, it's very, very boxy. When it transforms, it looks pretty good as far as the actual item goes, but it's not exactly the most detailed figure. And as you can see, I'm missing some things on there, some paints. You know, I had this when I was a kid, and I was 4 years old in 1984, and I believe this one came out in 1986 or something like that. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to show you the detail on the figure. So it's not incredibly difficult to transform. It's very, very simple. I'll turn it around here. As you can see, the back isn't anything spectacular. It's painted plastic. Very, you know, the parts really didn't hide very well. It just, when it transformed, it became basically what it was, and then it turned into the robot road. So when I was a kid, I always found that the Transformers looked more like their cars than they ever did like their robot counterparts. But these were the hours of joy that I've got playing with these particular figures. And this one, I remember when I was a kid, I saved up money for this, and I worked so hard. And you got to imagine a 6-7-year-old kid saving up their money, and this was $33, I believe, in the 1986 time frame, because I remember I saved up and I saved up and I got $13, and I went in to purchase it and I didn't have enough money. But that was from my childhood. I remember so much about this particular figure, and this is one of the few items that I had surviving from my childhood. So I just wanted to show you this Generation 1 toy. I've got a couple others I'm going to show you in just a second, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so these are all of the Generation 1 and Generation 2 toys that I have left. So this is a Dinobot. It's Generation 2. If it was Generation 1, it would be gray, more like the cartoon. I picked that up, so I think sometime in the 90s or whatever. This is a Generation 1 Jetfire or Skyfire, depending on how you look at it. And there's a lot of politics that went into this particular figure. It also resembles greatly the Robotech collection that so many figures. So basically, Bandai bought the rights to these figures, or had the rights to these figures to some extent. I might not be saying that 100% accurate, but I'm just saying that this was from the Robotech line. When it came to the United States, both Transformers and the Robotech line used this very similar robot mode type figure to to market its toys. So there's a little bit of controversy. As you can see, this particular one, when I was a kid, I just didn't take very good care of it. I was a kid. I played with it, and it just happened to survive into my adulthood. And then I had this one I bought a little bit later on when I was probably between 10 and 12. And I've just had these toys for a really long time. So as you can see, there's not a lot of, I mean, they're very, very clever. This is the Ultra Magnus figure that I showed you a few minutes ago. It looks like the Optimus Prime. I showed you the Optimus Prime for a reason, because really, if you look at the Takara line, this was Optimus Prime. It had a different patent scheme. So when they brought it over to the United States, they renamed it and called it Ultra Magnus, because this outer shell that you see right here was more or less just armor for Optimus, or convoy, I guess you could say, that the Takara line called it. But it came to the United States. Ultra Magnus pretty much debuted during the Transformers movie, the original cartoon movie. Jetfire, like I said, the cartoon and the actual toy didn't really look a lot alike, but they used this model because it was easier for them to make the other one, and I'll show you that one in a second. And then again, I always had a fascination with Dinobots, and then I never really had a chance to get one, but for the most part, this one just I came upon it, I bought it, it was relatively cheap. It's nothing spectacular. It's very short, very small compared to the other ones, which is kind of goes back to why we collect things. So I just wanted to show you these three Transformers. These are basically Generation 1 toys. Even though this Dinobot is a Generation 2, it means it's just a remake of the original toys. But I just wanted to show you guys, these are the things that we used to play with when we were kids that gave us hours and hours of joy that turned into obsessions when we became adults. Okay, and now if you fast forward a few years, you get into this. This is the 20th anniversary Optimus Prime, and this is a alternator, a smokescreen, one of my favorite characters from Transformers. This is an alternator, and they both came out around the same time, late 90s, early 2000. I believe Optimus came out about 2003. Smokescreen came out about the same time. I can't be 100% sure, but I remember I was shopping in a Walmart or a Kmart or something like that one day, and I came across this Optimus Prime, and I was so happy to get this Optimus Prime because it looks so much like the movie version of Optimus Prime. You look at it, it's got some battle damage, dark spots in there. It's got very accurate, his little mouthpiece moves here. His head's on a ball joint, you can move it around quite a bit. And at the time, I felt like this was the most accurate representation of Optimus Prime that you could get. I didn't even know that they were making other ones. So as you can see, it's got the little matrix of leadership in there. It has a light, but the light's pretty much dead. It's worked up until recently. But anyway, just the detail in this particular figure was absolutely amazing. I loved it. It's very heavy. It's die-cast in nature. And I would say that these two items right here, the reason why I'm showing these is because these are pretty much to scale. And I've had these in my collection since, so 20-year anniversary of the Optimus Prime was 1984. So 2004, 2003, that's about when that came out. That one is called the MP01, the Masterpiece 01. It's the first masterpiece that they started making of these Transformers, and it's great. It didn't come with a trailer or anything. It came with that gun. It came with some other things like his axe and a replica of Megatron, the handheld version of Megatron, but just his hand, like the gun itself in Optimus's hand. And again, that was smokescreen, and I thought that was, compared to when I was a kid, that was so, those both figures were just so amazing, and I've collected those for a really, really long time. And so you fast forward, you know, I don't collect Transformers nearly as much as I do other things, but I've had those items right there in my collection for a long time because I do like Transformers. They do take me back to my childhood, and it is something that's special for me. But you know, it goes back to why collectors collect. So most of the time I stumble into things. So when I started collecting my DC stuff, my action figures and whatnot, I just stumbled into a comic book store and they were selling DC Direct figures, and that's how I started buying on mass scale those figures. I went to my first Comic-Con about 3 or 4 years ago, and they're just the amount of toys and things that you can buy, statues and figures, and I started collecting other things. So I wanted to show you guys these two particular items because the first ones I showed you were Generation 1. These are the 20 years after, and you can see the difference between that Optimus Prime that I showed you earlier, or the Ultra Magnus, and this. Tons more detail, much more accurate to the cartoon. This one, even though it doesn't share its original body style, again, very, again, it was made from a Subaru, but Smokescreen, I think, was made from a Nissan Z. I could be wrong on that, but that was my original figures that I just kept in my collection for a long time. So in the next segment, I'm going to show you the masterpiece collection of all the different figures, and again, why it's so hard to collect, because they're so accurate nowadays. They just really take you back, and you'll be able to see that here in a moment. Okay, so here is the masterpiece collection. So that Optimus Prime is MP10. The other ones have different designations and whatnot from the masterpiece collection. But I wanted to show you guys all of these figures for a specific reason, because I showed you pretty much their Generation 1 counterparts. So I showed you the Generation 1 Skyfire, but that is the cartoon accurate Skyfire. I showed you the Generation 1 Optimus Prime, basically in the white version from Ultra Magnus. I showed you Ultra Magnus, which is right there, and I showed you Smokescreen, which is right there. So when you look at these particular figures, and I have to zoom out a little bit because Skyfire is so much larger than the other ones, these to me are to scale. So like when I was collecting these figures, I could have been happy with the MPO1 Optimus Prime, but the problem is, and I'll show you that here in a second, he's so much larger than this MP10. This MP10, when he transforms, and I'll show you that before the end of the video, I won't show you me transforming him because it's complicated and it takes time. I don't want to waste your time in the video. And I'll show you him next to Ultra Magnus, and then I'll show you all three of the Generation 1, the 20th Anniversary Masterpiece, and their size comparisons, and they're just there's no question in scale. They're just not accurate to me in scale. So like when I play with these things when I was a kid, like you'd play with whatever version of the toy and it'd be tiny and the scale was just not right, and it's because of whatever you were transforming it. That was the closest they could make. Like when you look at Ironhide and Ratchet, their heads didn't even come out the top because they couldn't figure out a way to transform it to where their heads was out. So their faces were basically in their chest pieces, and they just didn't look as accurate. But you know, when you're a kid, you have an imagination. Now we're an adult, and as adults become obsessed with collecting and whatnot, they end up transforming these items from their childhood into accurate representations of the items themselves. So I kind of started this off with why collectors collect. Well, as technology becomes more prevalent, as time goes by, they're just able to make these figures more and more accurate. So really cool. Ultra Magnus here comes with Daniel and Spike from the movie, just little versions of him. And then Optimus Prime comes with Spike from the cartoon series. So there's quite a bit of detail in these particular figures. So I just want to show, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these away. I'm going to show you some comparisons in scale here in just a second to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So just give me a second. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the difference in scale of all these figures. So this is basically a representation of the Generation 1 Optimus Prime. You can see how small he is compared to the MP10, and you can see how small the MP10 is compared to the MP1 character Optimus Prime. So there's a difference in each generation of action figure. So obviously that one's not very accurate to the cartoon, but that's what you had to play with when you were a kid. This one's not. This one is just spot on accurate to the cartoon, down to the last detail, including the matrix inside his chest. And then this one's a pretty good representation, but there's little things like this. If you look at his neck joint, it's just on a ball joint. You can see that. He's very, very clunky. This one, much more streamlined, like his neck looks like the neck from the cartoon, etc. Just a lot more detail in the figure itself. So I just wanted to show you kind of that detail. So here's Ultra Magnus there in the back. Look at the camera a little bit better. And there is the Ultra Magnus original cartoon. Now this is very boxy. It doesn't, the only thing that moves is his arms. His legs aren't able to bend or do anything like that or pivot. It's just basically a box with movable arms and whatnot. So I just have his head kind of stuck on there right now so I could show you that figure. But usually that figure would go in behind here and his head would fit on top of there, kind of like armor. And that's just how they had to do it, because you couldn't figure out how to make them all one piece. But the good part about that Ultra Magnus, and I'll transform him and I'll kind of show what I'm talking about, that is just all one piece. That's the great part about this. So like if I lift up this right here, there's nothing. It's just, like I said, I got a piece of sticky tack there to hold his head on, but there's nothing to this particular figure. It's very, very generic. So I'm going to take that one away, but you can literally open up Ultra Magnus here, maybe. And he's got a spot in there for the Matrix of Leadership. I mean, you can't even compare that one to that one. There's just no comparison as far as detail goes. And this is why collectors become obsessed, because they see these items from their childhood and they're so accurate. I mean, this character's legs move. His feet here pivot to different directions. You can see that. His hands open up and fold. Just a lot more detailed figures. So you look at these two right here. So this is the Generation 1 Skyfire. It's missing quite a few pieces. So the original Skyfire from the toy line had this red thing that came up from Robotech and whatnot, and they just kind of made that. They just made that Skyfire, and if you look at them, they look pretty close. But again, the scale is just not even. I mean, if you look at Ultra Magnus there and how much bigger Skyfire is, and you look at these two together, they're pretty much the same size. And that's what I'm talking about when I was a kid. Or if you look at the Dinobot, this is supposed to be bigger than this Optimus Prime, because he's a Dinobot, and Dinobots are huge. So hang on, I'll show you a transformed comparison. Just give me a second. Okay, I believe this Dinobot's name is Slag, and I apologize for not having that information, but if you look at him, he's actually smaller than the scale Optimus Prime is. And that's where the problem comes in, because really they should be bigger. And I understand why they didn't make them bigger, because, you know, that costs more money and whatnot, but these are very clunky, going back to what I was saying before. So his knees do bend, but his elbows do not at all. So his arms only go straight up and down. That's pretty much all you can do with it. His knees do bend, but look how big his feet are. I mean, they're just ridiculous in size. And these figures behind are just so much more proportioned than this is, or even this. So just a huge difference in scale. So if you collected all these from your childhood, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, I still have some of my own, but you're looking at an item that, in comparison, in a Bumblebee, and that Bumblebee right there is not much different size than the original MP1 Bumblebee, but that's another masterpiece Bumblebee, and you can see how much bigger than that Dinobot is slightly than Bumblebee. They're not really that much different in size. So to me, that bothers me a little bit as far as remembering my childhood. Yeah, these were great. You had an imagination, but these are so accurate to the cartoon. It's scary. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transform these items. I'm going to show you the scale. I'm not going to transform that big guy right there because that's just going to take me too long, and well, maybe I will. We'll see. Anyway, I'm going to transform these guys, and I'll show you the scale because that's really what I want you guys to understand why we collect. So, anyway, give me a few minutes, and I'll be right back. All right, guys, so just so everyone's aware, I didn't transform these on camera because I think it would have ended up being a 3-hour video, and obviously we don't all have that kind of time. So I wanted to show you guys. So this is the Generation 1. As you can see, I'm missing some pieces, but his head comes off, or it's a helmet type for the body of that. The hand comes off, and you can look at the scale. So I put together MP21 Bumblebee, who comes with a robotic form of Spike, but this is the Spike outside of the exoskeleton, that costume that he wears, and then this is Spike from the original TV series. And I kind of brought these guys out because I want to show you that how much the new Transformers have put together as far as scale goes. So you might look at that at first and you're like, okay, well, that looks like that might fit in there. And it kind of does at first, but when you look at Spike there next to Ultra Magnus, definitely a big difference in scale. So you look at the Volkswagen Beetle right next to this one, and you can definitely see the scale is now off. But when you look at the scale of the Beetle next to that one, and that makes a lot more sense. That's more accurate in real life, and so forth and so on. So I just wanted to show really quick the difference from the Generation 1 Ultra Magnus, and then you get into the different scales here for Ultra Magnus and Optimus. And as you can see, those two are almost identical for size, the transformation look, etc., etc. And these characters right here can actually go inside there. So give me a second and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I put Spike, the original Spike from the original cartoon, into Ultra Magnus here, and you can kind of see him in there pretty good. A little bit of glare, there you go. You can see him in there. That's just the level of detail that these new figures have in comparison to the old Generation 1 figures. So definitely a huge difference. There's little subtleties in Ultra Magnus here. He's got a red bumper instead of chrome bumper. Obviously, he does not transform into another version of Optimus Prime. Some of you might be asking, but that does not happen. Just really quick, I'll show you guys a little bit more detail on Ultra Magnus. Okay, so really quick, I just I just put Bumblebee in there because that is a car carrier, obviously. If you pull this trailer around, these ramps come down. So Bumblebee could theoretically, drive up in there. This upper part here does come down, so it kind of acts like a real trailer. Obviously, this is connected. One really cool point about this actually can come off of the cab of Ultra Magnus, which I thought was really a nice touch because it's all one piece. It transforms all from one piece, but this part comes off, which gives it a little bit more of a real feel to it. So anyway, I'm going to move this off to the side, and then I'm going to get into the two Optimuses, and then we'll get into Jetfire, or excuse me, Skyfire, Jetfire, whatever you want to call it, and I'll explain that here in a second. So you have Optimus here, and you can also have him, a character sitting inside the cab, as well as Ultra Magnus, which is really cool. There's a place for them to sit in there. When you look at when you look at the MP01 and the MP10, there's a definite difference. The MP10 looks more like an actual truck, whereas this one was the closest adaptation that they could get to a truck. But you've got the arm joint there. You've got it doesn't look as smooth, so to speak, as the MP10 does. So it's a lot. In my opinion, this one right here is much more accurate than this one is. So this one, you also don't have a spot to store his weapon, whereas on this one, it'll actually store up in this part, or it'll store in the back. So it stores in this area right here, or you can store them in the back with roller in the back of the cab. Excuse me, let's try to get this open here. So as you can see, this has a full cabin or a full trailer inside. This is really cool. This comes out just like the cartoon. And then inside, roller fits. And that to me is just amazing, because it's just like the cartoon. I mean, there's really no way else to describe it other than, if you want something from your childhood that gives you the feel of when you were a kid, but also takes you into more of an adult collector's mindset. First of all, these are not easy to transform in comparison to the original Generation 1. This one is much more complicated to transform than this one. This one is actually probably the easiest transformer that I have next to Bumblebee. So just really a lot more bulky. This one has rubber tires. It's also scale-wise a lot bigger. So for me, I just like it to be more accurate. When I have the other Transformers in my collection, I want them to be on scale. I don't want a character that's supposed to be smaller than Optimus to be bigger, and I don't want a character that's supposed to be bigger than Optimus to be smaller. So to me, it's really important to get the scale right and get the accuracy. And I said in another video, actually, that I had a Supergirl, and I showed you the difference between two Supergirl characters, one being more detailed than the other. And if they come out with a more detailed one, I'm going to get that one too. And I'll probably do the same with these, because again, I was at Salt Lake Comic-Con this weekend, and it was just, I saw all these figures, and I spent a lot of money on them to get myself up to speed on the collection. But when I talked earlier about why collectors collect in my other video, and now on this one, it's because we didn't have these when we were growing up. We didn't have this accurate detail that you get in these figures that you have now. And as I've gotten older, I started collecting with items like this, and I just had that because I thought it was cool. But then you get these coming out, and they're so much more detailed, and you can pose them and do different things with them and make them feel like you're inside the actual cartoon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these aside, and then I'm going to show you Jetfire and Skyfire just to wrap up this video, and we'll go. Alright guys, this is the last part of the video, and I'm going to show you these two. So this is Jetfire or Skyfire, whatever you want to call him. This is the toy version, Generation 1, of this character right here. So if you remember back from the 1984 cartoon, when you went to the store to buy Jetfire or Skyfire, this is what you had to buy. And if there's any Robotech fans out there, and as you can see, I really did not take very good care of this, but if there's any Robotech fans out there, this is basically a Veritech fighter from Robotech. The design is exactly the same. I can even show you guys one of those because I have one. I have two actually in my collection. But that is what that is. That is a Veritech fighter. There was, obviously some licensing things going on between Takara, Hasbro, and the licensing of the comic book and the cartoon. that gave us that particular design in. And realistically, that was the easier way to go for the toy manufacturer, because the cartoon was based on the toys. It wasn't a cartoon and then they came out with toys. It was toys first, and then they came out with the cartoon. And interestingly enough, so Robotech, this is actually a mech where a person sits in it, pilots it, and all other type stuff, and the Transformers are autonomous robots that transform into different things and whatnot. So when you look at this particular character right here, this is extremely heavy, first of all. Second of all, look at the size comparison between the two. So I showed you the Generation 1, and I mean, this was a lot bigger than the Optimus Generation 1. But as far as Ultra Magnus goes, it was the same size. And earlier in the video, you could see this one right next to that one. This one right next to Ultra Magnus, and it was just huge in comparison. In fact, this thing is almost 15 inches tall. It weighs over 3 pounds. It is just absolutely stunning, the level of detail that goes into these figures that they build nowadays. This took a long time to transform. I'd say 10-15 minutes, maybe more. It's really, really complicated compared to this. This I could transform in a matter of seconds. The legs just flip down. This chest piece right here just pulls forward. It bends in the middle. This thing flips up. And really, the arms just come out, and that's it. This, I mean, there's so many little pieces that you've got to transform for it to fit all together like it would in the cartoon. And the same thing with the rest of the masterpieces. They're really more for adult collectors. So just wanted to put this together. Here's the bottom line, guys. What I'll do is I'll transform these back together, and then I'll end this video. But when you're collecting Transformers, when you're collecting statues, when you're collecting action figures in general, just remember what you collect is really up to you. I collect mostly DC paraphernalia, whether it's Batman, Superman, or any of the Justice League members, but there's other things in my collection that bring me joy. I have a 1/6 scale RoboCop. I have a 1/12 scale RoboCop. I've got a character from I've got a Gypsy Danger from Pacific Rim. I've got Spider-Man, Captain America, Iron Man. I've got Commander Shepard, Miranda Lawson from and Ashley Williams from Mass Effect. I've got some Star Trek figures. I've got R2 and C-3PO. I've got some Legos. Really, what it comes down to when you're collecting is there are a lot of options out there for you if you're a fan of science fiction, if you're a fan of childhood cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons. There are tons of things for you to collect. So my advice is if you want to start small, you can do that without a problem. There are so many items out there that you can buy that are similar to what I'm showing you right now on camera. There's some items that are less accurate. I mean, it just really depends on what you like. But for me, it's the more accurate, the better. And that's why I collect Hot Toys. That's why I collect statues. That's why I collect action figures. And that's why I collect these Transformers. Is I loved this cartoon when I was growing up. I mean, what kid wouldn't like a vehicle that transforms into a robot? And the way they're making these masterpiece items really shows you that I'm not the only one, because if there's no money to be made, they wouldn't make them. And there's tons of people my age that grew up in the 80s that absolutely love these figures and want them in their collection. So I'm going to wrap this video up in a minute, and we'll go. Alright guys, and there you have it. That is my Transformer collection. This wraps up this video on kind of why collectors collect certain things, and I just wanted to show that to you guys. I picked most of these up at Salt Lake Comic-Con. You can get a lot of these on eBay right now, Big Bad Toy Store. There's tons of different places that you can get these figures, even the Generation 1. So I hope you liked the video. I'll keep making more. I apologize for the length of time between the last video and this one. Guys, want to thank you for everything you guys do. Make sure you comment below, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share it if you like it. Have a nice day.